Before what happened, I was the same as any other person that I saw on the sidewalk. Afterwards, it made me realize that to other people, perhaps we'll never be the same. It was at the end of March. I went out and got my food. I was the only Asian walking on the street. A white, middle-aged male was walking on the sidewalk. He was staring at me the entire time that we were getting closer and closer. He suddenly grabbed my hand, ripped the bag in half, and tossed it, and then kept walking like nothing happened. I was really stunned, and I just stood there. I froze. I came to Canada from China when I was 3 years old. I spent most of my life living in Toronto. I learned to see everyone as the same because all of us were Canadian. If I identified as Chinese, then that would mean that I wasn't Canadian. I felt like a Canadian in every sense of the word because I'd grown up here. This is where my family was, and this was where my friends were, and this is where I see my future. And I'm very proud of the fact that I am Canadian. I did my undergrad here at Queen's. I studied psychology, and then I started medical school here 2 years ago. I first started hearing about the pandemic in middle of January.
Asian Canadians report widespread racism over coronavirus.
COVID-19 is uncovering anti-Chinese racism.
Anti-Chinese racism on the rise in Canada.
I started seeing anecdotes of other Asian Canadians and Asian Americans experiencing racism. But I think in my mind, it always seemed like racism was so far from me that that could be something that would ever happen to me or anyone I knew. It always seemed like, oh, that happens to other people, that happens in other communities, that doesn't happen here. I was the only Asian walking on the street. A white male suddenly grabbed my hand, ripped the bag in half, and tossed it. I was really stunned. I froze. Everything happened so quickly. It was the noise that really brought me back and made me realize what had happened. A lot of people started coming towards him and yelling at him. He suddenly turned around and started running towards me and screaming, "It's her fault." That's when I ran. All of the bystanders physically formed a barrier around me. I couldn't stop myself from shaking. I was in tears. I couldn't get a sentence out. There was a nurse that happened to be there, Angela, and her daughter. So she got out of her car and spent a lot of time comforting me. And then she and her daughter drove me back home. I feel really, really grateful for her. Because I was alone that night. The house seemed really big and empty. I was definitely pretty scared. I called a friend, and we were on the phone until 2 or 3 in the morning. I was so scared, and that it suddenly made me second guess every single person that I was seeing on the sidewalk. And I hated that. I hated that I lost my sense of security. I probably didn't go out for at least a week and a half afterwards.
I heard Mary's story first from her post on Facebook. seeing stories of individuals getting assaulted or harassed, racial abuse, you do feel sad and you do feel angry, but when it's someone you know, that's how you know it's real. In the early pandemic, when you experience on the subway someone walking away from you, or you visibly notice them, pulling up a scarf or something to cover their mouth, you do feel belittled. You do feel like, oh, are you doing this because of the way I look? Even though they seem small and insignificant, they do add up and place a burden on someone emotionally. Not only do we also worry about the virus, but there's also a dual concern, too, of this growing pandemic of racism. The spread of COVID-19, just like the spread of SARS, in many ways has reanimated and brought back a lot of the racist tropes. I was 6 years old when SARS hit. Kids were playing, and I wanted to join them. I came, and they said, no, you have SARS, you're Chinese, all Chinese people have SARS. We don't want to play with you. And I just remember leaving and feeling sad from that. When we first heard about this new virus from China, part of me was really concerned about, oh no, what is this going to mean for Chinese kids at school, bullying that's going to come from this. Racist tropes like yellow peril have really existed systemically throughout Canada's history. So whether that was the racism that was faced by Chinese who first came here to work on the railroad that connected Canada, or to the Chinese head tax, which was meant to exclude and discourage immigration from China. When you have a virus like this, it just fuels that again.
After what happened, it definitely makes me think that maybe I was just too naive and only seeing the things that I wanted to see in the past. Growing up, I never really thought much about racism. As a culture, I think we very much in general are ingrained to be grateful for what we do have and not necessarily complain about what we don't have. Because I'm a female, because I'm a minority, I knew that I would have to work harder for maybe half as much or the same things that other people didn't have to work as hard for. And up until this point in my life, I was always okay with that. Afterwards, it definitely made me sad, realizing that no matter how hard I worked, there perhaps will always be people where for them, the color of my skin is the single most important thing about who I am. I've always thought of myself as Canadian. Maybe they will never think that I'm Canadian.
When I go back to China, I feel like I'm a tourist, an outsider. I don't speak the language well. You don't understand the social cues. When you come to Canada, and sometimes there are incidents that make you feel like you don't belong.
I think it just made me realize how much more we have to do to make it really an accepting country for everyone. Oftentimes, it's other people who have that power to make that change. Something as simple as driving me home that evening, those small things, I think they make the biggest difference.
Hi, Mary. It's Angela. Hi. So good to see you. Yeah.
I wasn't expecting to see you.
Yeah, and Cassidy.
Thank you so much. Honestly, I don't know if you realized how helpful you were that day.
I'm just glad that we were there for you and we were able to help you.
Every time that I think about what happened, it's like my brain jumps over what happened and I just think about you and everyone else that was there for me. I'm really grateful. Thank you so much.
I hope that more people take the time to listen, not turning a blind eye when you see things that shouldn't happen, and speaking up.
My generation seems to be passionate about a lot of social justice issues like racism, but A lot of these attitudes still linger in the society as a whole. I am cautiously optimistic. How's school going? Do you get affected by COVID or?
We probably won't start our clinical placements until like a few months later.
When I think about getting back out and like going to like spaces with a lot of people, that kind of gives me anxiety now.
I still can't adjust.
We have this culture that our parents give us, but we also have this culture that we grew up in. You try to craft an identity out of both of these cultures. I'm Canadian, a person with a Chinese background. I think that's who I am.
Before this, I didn't necessarily identify myself as Chinese. That was something that was in my past. I'm focusing so much on the future that I didn't really give much thought to that part of who I am, whereas what happened really forced me to think about that. Being Chinese is a part of who I am every single day for the rest of my life. And I can't hide that, and I can't run away from that, nor should I have to, nor do I want to. It's the realization that this is always going to be a part of who I am, and I should embrace both sides of that. I'm both Chinese and I'm Canadian, and one doesn't necessarily mean that I'm less of the other.